There are photographs that change lives, and then there are photographs that change faith. In early 2021, a small town in Ontario awoke to headlines that sounded almost unreal. Image of the Virgin Mary appears in church fire smoke. Photographer claims no edits. The picture was everywhere, shared thousands of times across Facebook and local news groups. In it, thick gray smoke curled above the burning roof of St. Anne's Parish. But right in the center, formed by light and ash, was the unmistakable outline of a woman, her head bowed, her hands open in prayer, her veil glowing through the smoke. What startled everyone most wasn't just the image itself, but the man who took it. Mark Leduc was not a believer. He was a freelance photojournalist, the kind who showed up when everything went wrong. Car crashes, protests, fires, funerals. People in town knew his name from the credits under tragic headlines. Photo by Mark Leduc. He had covered the pandemic's darkest months, lost friends to sickness, and once said in an interview, "Faith is something people invent when they can't explain the world." That's why when the miracle photo spread, even his colleagues laughed. "Come on, Mark, you of all people, you expect us to believe this wasn't a trick of light?" But Mark never claimed anything. He just said one sentence to the police that morning, "I didn't see her until later." The day had started like any other in late January. Freezing winds off Lake Ontario, sunlight bouncing off layers of snow. St. Anne's Church sat at the edge of town, a modest red brick parish that had stood since the 1940s. Inside, volunteers were preparing boxes for a winter food drive. At 9:42 a.m., someone called 911. Smoke was rising from the choir loft. Within minutes, fire trucks arrived. Flames had already climbed into the roof beams. The wooden cross above the altar glowed orange through the haze. Father Raymond Collins, the parish priest, tried to rush inside for the tabernacle, but firefighters held him back. Mark arrived 5 minutes later, camera slung over his shoulder, breath forming clouds in the cold. He didn't pray. He didn't think. He did what he always did, find the angle, adjust the shutter, and document the chaos. "All I saw was destruction," he would later recall. The roof collapsing, people crying, the priest shaking. It was another story of loss, nothing more. But in that swirl of smoke and flame, something silent happened, something he wouldn't notice until much later that night. After the last truck left, Mark uploaded his shots to his laptop. Frame after frame, smoke, water spray, firefighters, reflections. Then, one image stopped him. There, suspended above the roofline, light cut through the smoke in the shape of a woman, not random, not abstract, the folds of her robe, the tilt of her face, the faint glow where her hands met. Mark froze. For a long time, he couldn't breathe. He zoomed in. The pattern held. He flipped to the next frame. Gone. Back again. There she was. He checked the metadata, untouched, unfiltered, 10:06 a.m. Outside, snow fell quietly. Inside his apartment, the screen seemed to glow with something beyond explanation. That was the moment the story began, a story of a skeptic, a photograph, and a fire that would set an entire community's faith ablaze once more. Before the fire, Mark Leduc was known for one thing: precision without emotion. He had the eyes of a professional, but the heart of a man who had seen too much. At 38, he lived alone in a small apartment overlooking a frozen river in Oshawa, Ontario. His walls were lined with photographs: wars, floods, political rallies, funerals. Every shot captured truth, but never tenderness. "You learn to detach," he once said to a young intern. "The lens protects you from believing too much." Mark wasn't always this way. He had grown up in a Catholic family. His mother, Claire Leduc, attended Mass every Sunday and kept a small statue of the Virgin Mary on the kitchen counter. She prayed quietly, even when Mark rolled his eyes. When cancer took her in 2015, Mark stopped going to church altogether. At the funeral, while the priest spoke about eternal hope, Mark stood in the back with his camera, not as a son, but as an observer. That day, something in him shut down for good. After that, his career flourished, as if pain made him sharper. He got assignments from the Toronto Star, then the Globe and Mail. He covered house fires in the suburbs, car accidents on icy highways, even a refugee camp story in Greece. But when the pandemic hit, everything changed again. Mark documented overcrowded hospitals, grieving families through glass windows, and the quiet despair of empty streets. "If God exists," he told a friend once, "he's got a strange way of showing mercy." So when his phone buzzed that winter morning, "Church fire at St. Anne's, urgent, bring camera, local story," Mark didn't think twice. Just another day, another tragedy. He had no idea that the place burning that morning was the same parish where his mother once prayed every week, the same church where he had been baptized long before he ever picked up a camera. As he parked near the scene, he noticed the old stone cross on the church facade, half hidden in smoke. For a second, a flicker of memory crossed his mind. His mother's hands, lighting a candle inside that very building. Then the sound of sirens drowned everything out. He lifted the camera, and once again the lens came between him and the divine. By the time Mark reached St. Anne's, the street was already blocked off with yellow tape. Fire engines lined the narrow road. Water from the hoses had turned the asphalt into a mirror of ice. Smoke rose in thick gray columns, twisting into the pale morning sky. He ducked under the tape, showing his press badge. "Media," he said quickly. The fire captain gave him a short nod. "Stay clear of the main entrance. Roof's unstable." The camera strap pressed against his neck as he moved closer. Every exhale turned to fog. He snapped the first shots, firefighters dragging hoses, volunteers crying behind the barricades, the priest kneeling near the snow. Through the smoke, the stained glass windows cracked like spiderwebs of color. Mark was trained to look for symmetry even in chaos. He circled the church, stepping over frozen puddles, stopping when he saw the light shift, that faint orange glow breaking through gray. He raised the camera again. Inside, timbers collapsed with a low roar. A firefighter shouted, "Back up!" Mark stumbled backward but kept shooting. Reflex. Years of instinct overriding fear. One burst of images, 5 clicks in a row. Then another. The shutter rhythm cutting through the sound of destruction. "All I wanted," he would later tell investigators, "was to capture the truth of what was happening. Nothing more." At 10:06 a.m., a sudden draft swept through the broken windows, drawing the smoke upward in one single spiral. It was brief, maybe 2 seconds, and Mark's camera caught it. But at that moment he didn't see anything unusual, just smoke behaving like smoke. He lowered the camera, wiped his lens, and kept working until the last flame was gone. By noon, only the blackened skeleton of the church remained. Father Raymond stood silently near the ruins, his gloved hands clasped, lips moving in prayer. Mark took one final picture of him, a man praying beside ashes. Then he packed up, nodded to the chief, and left without a word. He didn't know that inside his camera card was a single frame, one that no one could explain, one that would soon divide an entire town between believers and skeptics. That night, the snow hadn't stopped. Mark sat alone in his small apartment, boots still wet, hands trembling slightly from the cold. He poured himself black coffee and plugged in his camera. Another routine job, he thought. Another story of loss for tomorrow's front page. The laptop screen lit up with rows of thumbnails. Gray, orange, red, smoke, water, faces. He leaned closer, sorting through the chaos frame by frame. In the background, the radio played quietly. A newscaster reporting St. Anne's Church fire under investigation, cause still unknown. Mark barely listened. He opened the first sequence. 9:57 a.m. Firefighters entering. 10:02, the choir loft collapsing. 10:05, the crucifix engulfed in haze. Then came the next series, time-stamped 10:06:14. One of them made him pause. It was strange, the composition almost too balanced. A column of smoke rising from the center of the broken roof, sunlight filtering through shattered beams. He zoomed in. At first he thought it was just light refraction, a trick of perspective. But as he adjusted the exposure, the shape became clearer, a silhouette forming naturally inside the swirl. The longer he stared, the less random it seemed. The curve of the figure, the soft outline of a veil, the hint of open hands. And where the light hit the smoke, it wasn't harsh or chaotic. It was gentle, as if glowing from within. Mark pushed his chair back. He checked the file's metadata. No filters, no double exposure, no manipulation. The timestamp matched exactly when the roof gave way. He whispered under his breath, "No way." Curiosity turned to disbelief. He opened the next frame. Gone. Back to the previous. There. She was again. A perfect image suspended in smoke, as if the moment itself had been framed by an unseen hand. He tried to reason it out. Maybe a reflection from a firefighter's lamp. Maybe sunlight refracted through melting snow. Maybe coincidence. But something about the serenity of that face, the bowed head, the calm amid destruction, made him feel something he hadn't in years: stillness. For the first time in a long while, Mark didn't know what to do with the picture. He didn't send it to the editor. He didn't post it online. He just stared. By midnight, he finally printed the image on matte paper, purely to see it in his hands. Under the desk lamp, the smoke looked alive, shimmering faintly. And there, right above the burning beams, the image of a woman seemed to emerge again, unmistakable, almost breathing. Mark turned off the lamp, but even in the darkness he could still see her shape imprinted in his mind. "I didn't believe in signs," he later said, "but that night I couldn't stop looking at one." By the next morning, Mark still hadn't slept. The printed photo lay on his desk, cold coffee beside it. He wasn't sure why, but he sent a single copy to his editor, just to ask, "What do you see in this?" An hour later, the reply came, "That's unreal. Did you stage it?" Mark didn't answer, but by noon, the editor had forwarded it to a local news anchor, and by evening, the image was on television. The anchor's voice trembled slightly. "Viewers, tonight's top story, an image that many are calling miraculous. In the smoke of St. Anne's fire, some claim to see the Virgin Mary." The segment replayed Mark's photo in slow motion, zooming in on the figure in the smoke. Social media exploded. Hundreds of comments poured in. "I see her so clearly. It's a sign." "No way, that's edited." Some wept. Others mocked. But everyone looked. By midnight, the small parish of St. Anne's, half burned, still under police tape, had turned into a place of pilgrimage. People left flowers by the gate, rosaries frozen in the snow. Father Raymond, the priest, returned to find candles flickering on the church steps and strangers praying in silence. "I didn't expect this," he told a reporter. "Yet, maybe heaven is reminding us that she still watches over us, even in ashes." Mark watched the coverage from his couch, the TV light reflecting in his tired eyes. He muted the sound. The world was talking about his photograph, but no one knew what it had done to him inside. He felt both exposed and invisible, the skeptic behind a sacred image. And though he wanted to believe it was just coincidence, something deep within whispered, "What if it wasn't?" By sunrise the next day, the parking lot outside St. Anne's looked like a vigil. Dozens of cars lined the road, their headlights cutting through fog. People knelt in the snow, holding rosaries and candles, whispering prayers that melted into the cold air. "We saw her in the smoke," one elderly woman told the Toronto News. "It was like she was there to protect the church, even as it burned." Local TV vans arrived first, then national reporters. Drones hovered over the ruins. Some journalists called it the miracle of smoke, Others dismissed it as a beautiful illusion. Still, every news cycle replayed the image, that single, silent frame, while viewers debated online whether heaven had really intervened. The Diocese of Peterborough released a statement the following evening. While the Church makes no formal judgment on miraculous claims, we acknowledge the deep faith this image has inspired. We invite all the faithful to pray for discernment and for the rebuilding of St. Anne's. Crowds grew each day. Families drove for hours from neighboring towns just to stand near the blackened walls. Someone placed a small statue of the Virgin Mary amid the ashes. Others left handwritten notes. "Thank you for showing us you're still here." Father Raymond moved quietly among them, blessing each person, eyes shining with fatigue and wonder. "We lost a building," he told a reporter, "but maybe we gained something greater, a reminder that faith can rise even from smoke." As for Mark, he avoided the church entirely. He watched the crowds from a distance through his car window. Cameras flashed where his camera once stood. He should have felt pride, but instead he felt small. He wasn't ready to admit it yet, but a strange unease had begun to take root. The sense that maybe, for once, his photograph wasn't his own. Within a week, the miracle had become a controversy. What began as awe turned into interrogation. News outlets from Toronto to Montreal started running segments titled "Divine Sign or Digital Trick?" Analysts zoomed into pixels, debating reflections, angles, and camera lenses. Some said it was smoke. Others called it computer-generated art. Then came the online forums, claims that Mark had edited the photo to gain fame. A local skeptic group even demanded the police investigate possible fabrication of evidence. Mark's inbox overflowed with messages. Some thanked him for restoring their faith. Others called him a liar. One email simply said, "You faked a miracle. God will judge you for it." He stopped answering calls. Even his editor grew nervous. "Mark, just tell them how you shot it. The light, the shutter, everything. People need facts." But the truth was simple, and that simplicity scared him most. "I don't know," he told her quietly. "It just happened." He spent nights replaying that morning in his mind, the sound of timber falling, the exact moment he pressed the shutter. He reviewed the metadata 100 times, searching for any clue that could make it ordinary, but every detail was consistent. Still, the pressure built. At one press conference, a reporter shouted, "Mr. Leduc, are you saying you believe this was the Virgin Mary?" Mark froze. Cameras clicked. He hesitated, then replied, "I'm saying I took a picture. What you see in it, that's up to you." The clip went viral again. Half the audience admired his honesty. The other half accused him of hiding the truth. That night, he deleted his social media accounts and turned off his phone. But silence didn't bring peace. Because deep down, he knew, even if the world stopped asking questions, one still echoed inside him. Why was I the one who saw her? While reporters debated and skeptics dissected pixels, Father Raymond Collins stayed silent. He avoided the cameras, the interviews, the noise. He spent his days walking around the burned ruins of St. Anne's, his gloved hand brushing the blackened bricks. Then, one evening, he finally spoke, not to the media, but during a quiet interview for a local parish bulletin. His words surprised everyone who heard them. "The night before the fire," he said softly, "I couldn't sleep. Our church had been struggling. Attendance was low, donations even lower. We were weeks away from closing one of our outreach programs for the homeless. I sat in the sanctuary long after everyone left. The candles were almost gone, and I remember saying out loud, 'Mother of God, if you are still with us, please, show us you haven't forgotten this place.'" His voice broke for a moment. Hours later the fire came, and when I saw that photograph, I knew my prayer had been answered, not as I expected, but as heaven often does, through ashes. He looked down, holding a fragment of charred wood from the altar. People think miracles are meant to prove something, but maybe they're meant to remind us that even in destruction, we are never abandoned. The interviewer asked if he believed the image was truly the Virgin Mary. Father Raymond smiled faintly. Faith isn't about proof, it's about presence, and I felt her presence that day. When the recording aired on local TV, even the most skeptical viewers fell silent. For the first time, the debate wasn't about photography or science, it was about meaning. And somewhere in his apartment across town, Mark Leduc watched the priest's trembling hands on screen. He didn't say a word, but something inside him shifted. For days, Mark avoided people. He turned down interviews, muted his phone, stopped checking the news. But the photo never left him. It was pinned on the wall above his desk, haunting, beautiful, impossible. One evening, while sorting old boxes of his mother's belongings, he found a small tin container marked Claire L. in faded pen. Inside were prayer cards, rosary beads, and a stack of yellowed photographs, most from his childhood. He smiled faintly at one, his mother lighting candles inside a church. The stained glass windows behind her shimmered with soft blue light. Something about it felt familiar. He turned the photo over. In her handwriting it read, St. Anne's Parish, 1996. Mark froze. He grabbed his camera from the table and compared the old photo to the one he had taken during the fire. Same angle, same spot. The light pouring through the same upper window, the one that had collapsed that morning. He whispered, almost in disbelief, Mom, this was your church. A wave of memories flooded back. Sunday mornings when she took his hand to Mass, the way she would whisper, pray for peace, even when you don't believe. He remembered rolling his eyes then, pretending not to care. Now, sitting alone in the dim apartment, he felt every word return like an echo. The air felt heavy. He opened the window, letting the winter breeze in. On his desk, the photograph of the smoke shifted slightly under the draft, and for a second, the light from a street lamp outside caught the paper just right. The image of the Virgin seemed to glow again. Mark reached out, touching the corner of the photo. For the first time since his mother's death, he whispered a prayer, awkward, halting, almost childlike. If you really are there, if she's with you, tell her I remember. The room went still, no voices, no signs. Just quiet peace, the kind he hadn't felt in years. That night he couldn't sleep, not from fear, but from something else entirely, the faint, undeniable warmth of being seen. A week after finding his mother's photo, Mark drove back to St. Anne's. The road was nearly empty, snowbanks piled high on both sides, the kind of silence only winter in Ontario could hold. The church ruins looked smaller than he remembered, charred beams, shattered glass, the faint smell of smoke still lingering in the cold air. Yet amid the wreckage there was something strangely peaceful. He stepped over the caution tape and walked slowly inside. Every crunch of snow beneath his boots echoed. Sunlight filtered through the holes in the roof, falling in broken rays onto the ashes below. He stopped where the altar had once stood. There, blackened and cracked, was the same patch of floor where he had taken the photo, the same angle, the same direction his lens had faced. Mark knelt down. He wasn't sure why. Habit, maybe, or instinct. But when his knees touched the frozen ground, his chest tightened. He spoke softly, almost afraid of his own voice. If you were really there that day, then I need to understand why. Why me? No answer came, no vision, no voice, no sound beyond the whisper of the wind through broken windows. But as he looked up, the sunlight shifted, striking the air in front of him. Dust rose gently, curling into thin wisps of smoke, faint, fleeting, like breath. And for a heartbeat he thought he saw her again, not in fire this time, but in light. Tears welled up. He bowed his head and whispered a prayer he hadn't said since childhood. Hail Mary, full of grace. The words trembled out of him, awkward, but real. And for the first time in years, he wasn't speaking into emptiness. He stayed there for a long while, not as a photographer, not as a skeptic, but as a son who had finally come home. Spring came late that year. When the snow finally melted, what remained of St. Anne's was just a foundation and a few scorched walls. Yet every Sunday people still gathered there, not to mourn, but to pray. They called the site Our Lady of Smoke. Someone printed Mark's photograph on canvas and placed it near the old altar, protected under glass. Visitors knelt before it, touching the frame, as if touching something holy. A plaque beneath the image read, "Taken at 10:06 a.m., January 27, 2021, through the eyes of a man who did not believe." Father Raymond began rebuilding efforts, but the church funds grew faster than anyone expected. Donations poured in, not just from Ontario, but from across Canada, and even the U.S. people who saw the picture online wrote letters saying it rekindled their faith after years of silence. Sometimes, Father Raymond said in a newscast, a single photograph can preach louder than 1,000 sermons. And Mark? He no longer hid behind his camera. He still took photos, but different ones now. Baptisms, weddings, feast days. He said he finally understood that the lens wasn't meant to keep the world at a distance. It was meant to help him see grace more clearly. He never sold the original image. He donated it to the diocese, asking only that it remain free for anyone to see. On the first anniversary of the fire, the new foundation stone was laid. Snow began to fall again, soft, weightless. Mark stood at the edge of the crowd, camera lowered, eyes lifted toward the sky. And for a brief moment, as sunlight filtered through the flakes, he thought he saw the faint outline of a veil in the air, gentle, watchful, familiar. He smiled. He didn't need proof anymore. He already had peace. There are fires that destroy and fires that reveal. For Mark Leduc, the blaze at St. Anne's didn't end a story. It began one. Out of smoke and ruin came a picture that no one could fully explain. Some called it coincidence. Others called it faith. But for those who stood before that photograph, something deeper happened, a stirring of the heart, a reminder that heaven still finds its way through ashes. Maybe that's what miracles truly are, not spectacles for the eyes, but awakenings for the soul. Sometimes they arrive not in bright light or thunder, but in silence, a quiet image, a whisper, a warmth you can't quite describe. And perhaps when we least expect it, God allows the ordinary to become holy. A beam of sunlight through smoke, a mother's forgotten prayer, a camera shutter pressed at just the right second. If this story touched you, if it reminded you that faith can still surprise us, share it. Tell someone you love that hope is never lost. And if you've ever experienced something you can't explain, leave your story below. Someone out there might need to hear it. Because even today, in our modern world of headlines and noise, there are still moments when heaven interrupts, quietly, tenderly, unmistakably, through the hands of Our Lady, who never stops reaching for us.